We are going to have unavoidable losses, and people are going to move interstate. People are going to sadly die. People are going to have health issues. There are a lot of other reasons external to Rotary that people leave. The best we can do, I think, is be able to recruit against those losses. But if your club's not able to recruit against your losses, well, things are going to start going backwards. And that's really what we've seen, certainly in Australia and most of the Western world over the last 25 years or so. So what I want to focus on now is my top 5 reasons that we've not been able to recruit against our losses. And the reason my ugly picture's on the frame there is because I want to make something very clear here. These are the reasons I've come up with from my research into writing a book, from my time as a district membership chair, from my experience of starting a new club from scratch. And it's the reasons I've come up with. This is not official RI commentary. I'd like to think probably RI officialdom would agree with most of this stuff, but I do want to make that point. So I'm just going to go through my top 5 reasons from reason 5 to number 1 as to why we've been unable to recruit against our losses. And I'll just give a little bit of a warning here. There's probably going to be some stuff that some people aren't going to be too happy to hear. But let's just start the ball rolling right here. Reason number 5, we are no longer seen as relevant. I want to give you a snapshot of what is happening in Rotary clubs right across Australia, and I dare say New Zealand. And of course, there are clubs that are bucking these trends, but on average, this is a snapshot of what is happening. Firstly, our clubs are getting smaller. Secondly, our members are getting older. And thirdly, fewer of our members are working. More of our members are retirees. And you might think, well, so what? This is leading to us losing our capacity to do 2 really important things in Rotary. Number 1, serve our community. Because of our fewer members and our older members, we just don't have the same capacity to serve. And number 2, to network, because we're losing all those members that are in the workforce. And with the retirees, their natural networks are atrophying. I would imagine, despite our considerable public image challenges, most of the community, most of the people out there in the general public would recognise Rotary as a community service organisation and as a network. Those 2 things are really important pillars of the organisation and have been through the life of the organisation. So when all of a sudden our clubs are losing our capacity to network and serve our community, we start looking irrelevant. So that's the first reason. Okay, my reason number 4 is ineffective communication. On my list of reasons we've been unable to recruit against our losses. This is both an internal issue and an external issue. Our messaging is inconsistent, it's confusing, it's under-resourced, and it's often misdirected. If you were to think of some well-known NGOs and charities out there, let's say Greenpeace, Red Cross, RSPCA, Amnesty International, just to name but a few, you don't need to explain at all what those organisations stand for. Anyone would hear those names and immediately have a word picture as to what those organisations stand for. Yet when we mention Rotary International in the public, I don't know that the general public all immediately have a word picture of what Rotary stands for. And even we Rotarians ourselves, some of us who've been in the organisation for a long time, still have trouble articulating what it is that Rotary means and what Rotary stands for. And if you think of the average Rotarian, we've got a lot of conflicting and confusing messages running through our head. We've got our 7 international areas of focus, and we've got our 5 avenues of service, and we've got a 4-way test. We've got a motto, service above self. We've got a vision statement, a mission statement. And if all of these things are confusing enough, we go and change our theme every year. There's a lot of confusing and inconsistent communication going on inside and outside Rotary. Let's move to reason number 3. The volunteering landscape has changed dramatically over the last quarter century, and Rotary has not been able to keep up with that change. Having said that, we have actually had the tools to make those changes, but so many are not taking advantage of those. I'm just going to give you a quick example. I want to show you what Rotary looked like in the 80s. Now, I'll admit that I wasn't actually a Rotarian in the 80s, but I was a Rotaractor in the 80s, and I had quite a lot of involvement with my sponsoring Rotary Club and other Rotary clubs. That is what Rotary, the titles on the screen there, that is what Rotary looked like to me and to a lot of people, I guess, in the 80s. But since then, we've had amazing opportunities to make changes through successive councils on legislation. And we've brought in quite a few changes that should really be able to innovate the organisation, such as the admission of women, the relaxation of our qualification criteria, introduction of e-clubs. We started to prioritise engagement over attendance and then relaxed our attendance rules considerably. We initiated some pilot club initiatives where we tried different ways of doing things on official pilots. Back in 2013, yes, it is now 8 years since we changed our Rotary brand, and nothing drives me more bonkers than seeing the old Rotary logos all over the place. I honestly don't understand what that's about. Then we flirted with corporate membership. We've introduced rules where we can have corporate members, flexible meeting programs, new club models such as hybrid clubs, passport clubs, and we also removed that requirement for our weekly meeting, so we can meet fortnightly or on another frequency. So that's a very brief and by no means conclusive snapshot of the changes that we've been offered and allowed to make in Rotary over the last sort of 20 or 30 years. The problem, as I see it, is that within our ranks, we do have a number of people who are really fighting against a lot of these changes. I coined a phrase a few years ago, which I used lovingly, the guardians of the status quo. And they reject a lot of this change, and we're still fighting to get some of these things in. And the guardians of the status quo seem to be working very hard, in my mind, to take things back to the way they were in the 80s. And we really need to fight against that. We've got some great opportunities to change, but we need to adopt them and move forward with them. We've been offered these amazing new ways of doing things by RI, and we're just sort of trudging along saying, no, we've got this. We don't need your round wheels. Okay, down to reason number 2 on my list of the top 5 reasons we haven't been able to recruit against their losses. We've become obsessed with process to the detriment of outcomes. I want you to have a think about those things in clubland that often cause the most upset and arguments. And I think you'll find they're pretty much all process. It's a bit of a list, such as meals and menus and venues and sergeants and fines and songs and prayers and collars and flags and bells and cliques. Who sits next to whom? Who cooks the sausages, when we meet, where we meet, how often we meet. We seem to get very fussed about a lot of these things. And I think we need to hang our hats on our outcomes, such as our polio eradication, such as our youth development programs, such as clean water and sanitation. Those 7 international areas of focus, they're the things we really need to be focused on, not all these cliques and rituals and things in clubland. And of course, the number one unhealthy obsession we have with process is our unhealthy obsession with meetings. We've become a very meeting-centric organisation, and I will touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. But now for the number one reason I feel we've been unable to recruit against their losses over the last 25 years ago or so. Quite simple, we've become comfortable and apathetic. Not enough of us want to work hard enough to make these changes. We're too comfortable in the skin that we inhabit. And I often get asked this question, why is change so hard to implement in Rotary? Well, I have a theory, and I want to share it with you all today. I'm sure you've all seen these pie charts that represent Rotary International's age demographic. There's not really a lot of good news in there, I've got to say, but I want to tell you why I think change has been really hard to implement Rotary over that time. I'm going to split this group into the under 50s and the over 50s, and I'll declare that I became an over 50 a couple of years ago. In the general population, 50% of us are aged under 50. Yet in Rotary membership, it's only 12% that are aged under 50. And when we separate out those two groups, and when we put to our clubs the opportunities, as I've mentioned before on that big list to change, this big group is a very powerful voting bloc. And it's very easy for the 88% of our membership base over 50 to think, nah, we're comfortable with the way we're doing things. Why would we want to change things for that other 12%? I really think that's got something to do with it. And until we start relaxing on some of those things that we're really stuck on and getting ourselves perhaps a little bit uncomfortable, I think it's going to be really hard to change. I often look at Rotary as a big wall of round holes. And the older you are over 50, I think the rounder your peg, that more neatly fits into those round holes. And we're comfortable in Rotary. Rotary seems a much more comfortable fit for the over 50s. Whereas as an under 50, and most of my Rotary career was as someone who is under 50, I think your peg is a little more square and it doesn't quite as neatly fit into those round holes. You've got to sort of ram it in and it's not quite as comfortable. And again, it's about maybe creating some different shaped holes so different people can fit in there and diversify the organisation a little bit more. Finally, I just want to talk about the not my job factor. I'm going to show you an image shortly, which I use in a lot of my presentations. A number of years ago, there was an online competition called the Not My Job Awards, and people from all over the world were invited to submit photos. that explained the concept of not my job. And this one is the winner. Tell that the road marker decided that it wasn't their job to get out and move that log. Instead, they've just sort of swerved around it. I believe in Rotary, far too many of our members are saying, membership, not my job. And that's not to say they're not great Rotarians who don't work hard and put in a lot of effort to our programs and projects and fundraisers and do a lot of great work. Yeah, they're like the line market. When it comes to membership, they're just swerving around it because they think it's someone else's job. That's something that we really need to attack and get everyone on the same page. Okay, so I've spent a bit of time outlining how I think we got into this membership crisis. I think it's only reasonable to spend a bit of time talking about how I think we need to get out of it. So let's just shift focus. I believe the most valuable resource that we have as an organisation is the time that our members are prepared to give. Now, we all have something in common. None of us knows how much time we've got left on this planet. And it doesn't matter whether you spend the whole day sitting on the couch or you get out in the community and you do some great work. You're not getting that day back. We've only got a limited amount of time. So we need to really use that time as effectively and productively as possible. As someone in the membership development sphere, the number one question I get asked is, where are we going to find new members? So what I want to do today is get you not to ask, where are we going to find the new members, but ask this question. Of those people that we see as prospective Rotarians, how much spare time will they have? I'm now going to run through a little slideshow of various different categories of people. And I want you, when you see each image to come up, to ask yourself the question, how much spare time do they have? So let's start with university students. So these guys have got full-time uni, they've probably got a part-time job, maybe sporting commitments, family commitments. How much spare time do you think they'll have? We'd love to have more of them in Rotary, but how much spare time do you think they'll have? Let's move along to young people starting out in their career path. Working full-time, maybe putting in some overtime, trying to impress the boss, trying to work their way up the ladder. How much spare time have they got? Likewise, they may have sporting commitments, family commitments. They don't have a lot of spare time. Small business owners, this has been me for much of my Rotary time. How much time do they have? They're often the first ones in to open up the shop and the last ones to go out at night, and they're up all night doing payroll and bookkeeping, that sort of stuff. They don't have a lot of spare time either. Young families. What about this group? We often have rhetoric that Rotary is a family-friendly organisation. I would suggest that some clubs do this very well, but a lot probably don't. I don't think young families have a lot of spare time between changing the nappies and those trips to the supermarket that used to take 5 minutes but now take an hour because you've got to pack the toddler in the pram and take all the stuff. They don't have a lot of spare time either. And final group I want to look at before moving on is the corporate executives. Now, Rotary used to be the domain of the corporate executives, the high flyers, the CEOs, those captains of industry. These guys, they're spending more time, their available time than any other group. Now, you can tell how old this slide is because I used to be flying all around the world. No one's flying anywhere at the moment, but you understand what I'm saying. These people living out of hotels and they haven't got a lot of time. Now, I'm going to show you another group here, and all of a sudden, this is going to change when you think of how much spare time have they got. The retiree. Now, compared to all of the other groups we've just seen, these people have loads of spare time. Or more to the point, they have more choice over how they use their spare time. And they've got to that time in their life where they deserve it. And I've got no dramas with that whatsoever. But I'll put to you quite simply that the reason our organisation is dominated by retirees is quite simply they're the ones with the time. It really, in my mind, is that simple. Now, I want to make it very clear, I don't have a problem with the retirees or the seniors in our organisation. They're the backbone of our organisation, and we've been in a lot of strife without them. So I don't want to make this sound like I'm bashing retirees and senior people in the organisation. I have a lot of respect for them, and we really need them. I simply want to see more younger people in the organisation. So this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We can have the seniors in the organisation and also bring young people in as well. But we need to understand how valuable their time is to them. I want to do a little exercise here and get you all to have a little bit of a think about the sort of time you commit to Rotary in a year. And in post-COVID times, I just want to say a typical Rotary year. Maybe let's not think about last year as a typical Rotary year. Just think about for a moment how much time you commit to Rotary. And we're going to draw on a little sort of pie chart. Now I want to ask you the question, out of all that time in a typical Rotary year that you commit to Rotary, how much time do you think you spend on meetings and getting to and from meetings? This is something I questioned quite a lot, did a lot of research on in the process of writing my book. And I came to realise that for the average Rotarian in a typical year, maybe not a COVID year, in a typical year, they spent between 60 and 75% of the total time they committed to Rotary, either in or getting to and from meetings. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I reckon that's a bit of a problem, because what that means is that all of those other things we do in Rotary, the fundraisers, the community projects, the training, even the social, the fellowship events, we've got to squeeze into that last sort of 25 to 40% of that pie chart. I just don't think that's healthy. And I would suggest for many of you, you've probably never thought of it this way or seen it represented that way. I think that needs to change. Here are some questions that we typically ask ourselves about meetings. And I'm just going to whiz through them here because I know time is short. But these are quite legitimate questions we should be asking about our meetings. Are they interesting? Are they welcoming? Are they punctual? Are they professionally run? Are our guest speakers informative? Are our meetings good value? Is the food and service good at our meeting venue? These are quite legitimate questions to ask, and I would hope for most of you in your clubs you can put a tick against most of these. But what I want to do now is ask you the one question we never ask about meetings, but we definitely have to. And for those of you who like to take notes, if there's only one note you write down this next sentence, because I think it's really important. Are our meetings a productive and effective use of our volunteers' time? Just take a little bit of a time to think about that. When I'm speaking in front of a live audience and I'm actually there, this is what I normally get looking back at me. People are sort of scratching their heads. You know what? I've never really thought about that question. Are our meetings a productive and effective use of our volunteers' time? Well, I think it's time we started thinking about it. Because as I've already mentioned, busy people don't have a lot of time to give. So the time they give must be effective and productive. Okay, I want to ask you a few more questions here. And again, in the process of researching and writing my book, I asked this question of a lot of people. What is it that we want from our meetings? Now, I got a number of answers back that basically meant the same thing, and I consolidated them into one-word answers just to make this easier to understand. The top response I got was entertainment. People want to have a good night out. They want to have an informative guest speaker. They want a bit of fun, the sergeant session, telling a few jokes. They wanted to have an entertaining night. That was the number one thing Rotarians wanted from meetings. Number two thing was camaraderie. They enjoyed meeting up with their Rotary friends and breaking bread and sharing wine and talking about the sport on the weekend or the weather or their grandkids. Now, for the record, I think those two things are really important in Rotary meetings. So I'm not about to diss them or say that's not a good thing. And I also think most Rotary clubs probably tick those boxes pretty well. Here's what I soon realised, though, in recognising that 88% of our membership base is over 50, I realised that those top two answers were being skewed by the overrepresentation of over 50-year-olds in the organisation. So what I did was delve a little bit deeper into the stats, and then I pulled out just the answers from people under 50 in Rotary as to what they thought was important in meetings. And they're very different answers, and some of you may be surprised to hear these. Here's the top response: productivity. I used to think that young people just weren't interested in meetings. What I found out through my research is they don't mind meetings, but they've got to be productive. They want to be able to achieve something. So if your meeting is about, understanding and recognising the needs of people falling through the gaps of society, if it's about planning for some project or fundraiser and you're achieving something in that meeting, young people are interested. They're happy to come along. What they don't want is an unproductive meeting that wastes their time. The number two thing they wanted was networking. They want to be able to advance their careers. They want to be able to meet other people in business. And as I mentioned before, with an increasing component of our membership base now retired, those business networks are starting to atrophy. So when I ask the question, how well are we meeting these needs? I've got to put question marks on these. Some clubs are doing these things really well. I think some clubs are doing pretty well on those top two, the entertainment and camaraderie. But when it comes to productivity and networking, we've got a long way to go. I often look at Rotary and I feel that we've managed to put meetings right at the centre of the Rotary universe. We've got a very meeting-centric organisation, and everything we do seems to rotate around meetings. And even through COVID days where we weren't able to go and meet regularly at the hotel or the restaurant, we still managed to meet, and we still venerated meeting as important, even though we went to Zoom. We kept meeting. So what I'd like to see instead of meetings at the centre of the Rotary universe is service. at the centre of the Rotary universe. And I want everything else, including meetings, to rotate around service. I honestly think that's the way we've got to move forward if we want to improve the organisation. Here is one of the quotes from one of the world's greatest entrepreneurs. This is his #1 rule for all of his business platforms. Elon Musk, #1 rule, unless there's a specific purpose for a meeting, don't have one. But what do we do in Rotary? We do exactly the inverse of that. Whether we have a purpose for a meeting or not, we just meet. And I think we've really got to understand that our obsession with meetings and we're not using that time productively is really a detriment to the organisation. So I want to leave you with an image here. I want to leave you with a lens to look through. And the thing about lenses, when you look through a lens, things on the other side all of a sudden start to get a lot clearer. I want you to move away from this conference and look at everything your club is doing, not just meetings, but everything your club is doing, and ask yourself, is it productive and effective use of our time? Look at everything you're doing through a lens of productivity and effective use of time. And I think you'll start turning the corner and start improving our membership outcomes and start becoming more attractive to a larger range of people in the organisation. So I want to thank you again. A special thanks to DG Gillian for allowing the time for me to speak today. I'm so sorry I couldn't actually be over there in New Zealand. Hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to do things like that. And just finally, a few comments on my book. DG Gillian asked about the book. It's Australian dollars $24.90. You can find out more about it at that website, sfzpublishing.net. There's also access to my blogs and various resources on that website. If you want to get in touch with me, you're welcome to reach out on Facebook and have a chat, or you'll get in touch with me through that website. And I also chatted with DG Gillian. If there are a sufficient amount of people in New Zealand or in your district who are interested in the book, and maybe the district can compile a bulk order, we can certainly save a lot on postage by sending them all over in one hit. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you've got something out of my presentation. I wish you all the best with your membership outcomes, because we've got a lot of work to do in Rotary and we need more people to bear the load and do more work. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your conference.